June has arrived, and with it comes E3. Game announcements, update announcements, expansion announcement, interviews, leaks, trailers, excitement abounds! So we're just chilling. Grab your coffee, tea, or other beverage of choice, find a spot at the lounge, and let's just chill. Welcome to the Music Arcade. Hello everyone, welcome back to Music Arcade, where we're going to be talking about our favorite game music. I'm Galen, the sound guy, Firestone.
I'm Ranakel. Hello.
And I'm Edie, and you can find me very far from the lounge because it's a pandemic out there.
I'm fully vaccinated now. I actually went out into the world for the first time in a very long time for no reason the other day. It was nice.
Got my 2 appointments. Third jab next Monday.
Third jab?
First jab.
First jab. I'm like, third? There's a 3-shot solution now? Yikes. Well, congrats on your appointment.
Actually, there is one because Brazil has 2 vaccines and one of them was so badly developed that they discovered it has a 25% effect. So people need a third dosage.
Good job.
Go us.
All the more reason to have some nice tunes to relax to.
No kidding.
Nice segue.
Thank you.
Well, Eddie, take it away. This is your bad boy on the subject of lounging and not lounging.
Yeah, despite me being deathly afraid of lounges right now, this song is perfect for a lounge.
It really is.
It's the main theme to the game, The Saboteur, by Christopher Young. And I think Ranakel might be just too busy laughing his ass off that I just tried to pronounce that word.
No, that's fine. It's also an English word.
Yeah, Saboteur is it's a loan word. Yeah. Also, kind of funny, the game was developed by Pandemic.
Yes.
I kind of want that mask they have. It seems more useful than the face masks I use. You know, the one from their logo.
Yeah, I know the one you're talking about. God, I miss Pandemic, and God, I love this game.
God, I love this song.
It's a great
song.
The
soundtrack was amazing.
So, just to double check. This is a game that happens during the German occupation in the Second World War.
Yes.
It happens in France, and I'm the only one out of us 3 that hasn't played it.
Good job, though you probably would kind of dislike it because despite it being largely about the French resistance, the main character is Irish.
Ah, I see. Proceed with Mr. Saboteur.
Yeah. The main character is Irish, and the songs that you can listen on the radio in cars are mostly from the US, I think.
Yeah, one of them is by Nina Simone, in fact.
Yeah, I was going to say there isn't even any accordion that I noticed.
No,
I think a couple might have.
A lot of the tracks are largely lounge music. Like, you get a lot of that. In fact, the opening scene is in a cabaret.
Yeah, I think it starts outside of France because the dude is a former race car racer at the time. The
game itself takes a lot of cues from war movies from the 50s and 40s, including like Casablanca, which, yes, the war is there, but it's not actually the main focus. It's usually about this more personal journey, and in this guy's case, that involves a series of pulpish adventures, including his race car driving career, which he continues even while fighting the Nazis. It's actually like a shockingly effective story if you're not expecting a straight war story. And I think the music really plays into that, and I think this song really sets that tone, because it's not like the military march you kind of think of.
And it's also, the game starts entirely in black and white, and you get more colors as you liberate parts of France, of Paris, actually.
Yeah. Yes, actually France, but the French map is like 80% Paris and 20% coastline. So.
Yeah, pretty much. The very jazzy, loungy soundtrack kind of fits also in the sense that it has a very strong film noir vibe.
It does.
Oh, absolutely.
The game is very film noir. It's like when you boot it up, the only colors you can see other than black and white are red from Nazi flags and from blood splatters. So it kind of feels like the Sin City comics.
That's not entirely true.
Movie.
And I know this because there is an option in the menu to turn nudity off. And if you do, the topless dancers will get these bright blue nipple pasties.
Oh.
Oh, boy.
Well, I guess that's the same amount of colors as Mad World, then. Which has black, white, red blood splatters, and a bit of yellow for the walling bands and the likes.
Nice. Yeah, no,
it's also the furthest things from a relaxing soundtrack.
Yes. Okay, I've got to talk about this because this was hilarious. You get yelled at in the menu by the main character if you turn nudity off. He's actually like, you could just go to confession, and then you turn it back on. He's like, woohoo! I'm like, oh god.
I love this little detail.
Oh man.
Now I have a question. So there's a lot of relaunch music. Do any of it play during the action, or is it only for the parts while you're supposed to do things like driving peacefully or being in a safe house?
It's safe houses. The action sequences are more traditional orchestral.
Yeah, that's what I assume, because that wouldn't really make sense to illustrate, say, a stealth action part.
Yeah.
If I recall correctly, when the game begins, like at the beginning of the story of the game, the character is kind of homeless and he lives in the backstage of a what do you call it?
Of a cabaret,
in English? A cabaret. So at the cabaret, he has more cabaret-like tracks rather than jazz, if I recall correctly.
But then that's more diegetic. So
yeah,
and
they have an excuse.
The use of jazz also is very diegetic. So either in a car radio, and only on cars that have radios, so not the race cars, if I recall correctly. And it plays from actual radios within the resistance hideouts.
correct.
It's not like playing as a soundtrack. It plays from the in-game radio.
Makes sense.
Except for the main theme, of course. The main theme is full
Yeah, I mean
blast.
that's the menu theme, so of course.
And I don't have too much else to say. It's just it gets the vibe really well. It's very suave. Like it's kind of the opposite of what the main character is. The main character is a hot-headed Irish drunkard, and this track is very, very suave, very collected.
Yeah, I'm not really thrilled about the politics of an IRA bomber blowing up Nazis, because that's like weird, but
yeah, the enemy of my enemy isn't always my friend.
yeah, but if you can like get past that, it actually, again, I really, really, really enjoy this game and this story, and I think it's super good. I wish this company had a chance to make more. They made the 2 Mercenaries games, they made this one, and then that was the end. And I'm just like, all of their games were so much fun, and it was just those 3 open world kind of GTA knockoffs with their own like twist to them, and it just worked so well.
Yeah, very interesting conceptual twist too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like to describe Saboteur to other people as sort of like in Assassin's Creed fan base, you get a lot of people going, we want something more modern. Maybe if they could do something in World War II. Saboteur is that, except
really
the
is.
whole sci-fi part of things. You can climb around, you can liberate parts of the town. Very, very freeing.
Oh, there's a sci-fi part of the game as well. I don't want to spoil it, but it takes some cues from Indiana Jones at one point. That's pretty funny.
Yeah, true. So it's not like the Animus from
No,
Assassin's
you're not
Creed.
dealing with Desmond or anything like that. Yeah.
Screw Desmond.
Well, eventually, even Assassin's Creed gave up on him.
Kinda. Don't want to spoil anything, but he's not away from the franchise.
Yeah.
That's beside the point.
Yeah, that's not really the point of what we're talking about. No, I would love more in this vein. In fact, I almost got into one of the Ghost Recon games entirely because it reminded me of Mercenaries. And I'm just like, oh. Alright, I think...
Thinking about the theme itself, one last thing to maybe conclude on it.
Sure.
Is that on top of the fact that I could immediately discern that it's for the most safe environments and to help you cool down from the action.
Yep.
It also served to situate you in time, which I think, looking at the rest of the track, a lot of the other tracks seems to be for place focused, and this one is more time focused on the way it transports you.
I think that's fair. And I think, again, I think it's just one of the things about it that just works so well. As you said, you took one listen to this and you just got it. And I think there's something to be said, like, a lot of the times we talk about more fanciful stuff, but there's something to be said about just having on-the-nose music. Like, this is exactly what you're trying to do, and you did it. Congratulations. Really can't hate that too much.
Exactly. Now then, it was mentioned before that this track and its calm tone kind of clash with the main character.
Yeah.
Next is then a track that's, unlike what I just said, more of a character piece, and it is made to fit the character's attitude to a T. It is Godot's theme from Phoenix Wright Trials and Tribulation, more specifically from the Orange album Turnabout Jazz Soul, which just fits that theme in particular 100%. The fragrance of dark coffee.
Yeah, I never got to play any of the Ace Attorney games actually. I played a clone of it for that they made for the Harvey Birdman Adult Swim cartoon.
And I played a Flash version of it where they were talking philosophy instead of law.
Yeah. But the actual Ace Attorney I've never played, so I came in blind, as usual.
That's kind of ironic, given that the character in question is... he has this big visor, in kind of like Cyclops in front of his face, because he lost most of his vision.
So he's the one with the sax on the cover art?
Correct.
Yeah, I really like this song. Like, I've played it a couple times in the background today. Really, really neat. I like that it kind of has... Most of it does have that sort of cafe feel to it. Like, you can almost start hearing the clinking of glasses and mugs and the chatter in the background sometimes. It's not in the music, but you can start hearing it if you think too much about the ambience.
Or from the way most people use this music, the rain falling on the window. Because it was a very popular combination for a while.
That actually brings me to the other feel that I got on the first section with the sax. Because the sax comes in and out, and it's not present through the entirety of the song.
Right.
But the first section with the sax kind of had a noir feel to me, like the Saboteur theme. It sort of sounded a bit darker than the preceding instrumentation, but still fits really well. Really, really well made song.
It is. It's very good, and it serves a purpose as well in the game to establish the character in a way, because he's a character from the third game in the original Ace Attorney trilogy, and he's a new guy. And given that the relationship between your main character and the prosecution, which is the opposing party, is very special, it's easy to see a newcomer and immediately think, look at who is this chump, give me back Edgeworth, give me back Franziska von Karma. And then this guy comes in with that theme, while drinking a cup of coffee instead of talking to you for the first couple of minutes, and everybody else is hyping him up. And there's this music, which is his theme, that builds up to that suave attitude. And so it kind of builds up this big deal, which is an escalation from the previous prosecutors, which were big deals on their own mind, on their own level, except for the tutorial guy, of course. But then he opens his mouth and he mentions that I've never lost a trial. Well, this is technically your first trial. That's right. And because I've never won a trial, I simply have never lost a trial either.
Oh dear.
And immediately like that, pretty much everything, including the absolute beautiful syrupy suaveness of this theme, helps building up to this establishing joke that have this kind of grudge that this character has towards your character, along with some goofiness. Like, it's a grudge, like I mentioned, but not as malicious as some of the other characters, which are much more outwardly aggressive. And I really like that. It's a song that really serves the character, the situation, and that comes back pretty regularly, especially after he objects to completely block all of the arguments you've tried to make. And given that how in most of the situation things go panicky and ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, here it's okay, we're going to stop. You're saying something stupid. Let me tell you why once I finish my 27th cup of coffee.
You know, your description of this character explains so much why he's the only guy with a trench coat on top of a white suit on that cover art.
I know.
He tries so hard to look cool.
Oh, yeah. Meanwhile, Edgeworth on the left doesn't even have to try. And Phoenix on the right has no hope to succeed.
Those seagulls aren't helping him.
Of course. Anyway, that's about all I've wanted to say on this track. A bit of a character piece, which is unusual again, but it does build this relaxing theme, even out of its context. It's just nice to sometimes get yourself in a corner and listen, and give it a listen.
Yeah.
Now then, shall we move on to Operation Cinder's menu feed?
Okay, so I'm an Arknights player. We know this. This is not new information. And recently, we've had the newest contingency contract, which is the most stressful time in this video game. It is an incredibly difficult, incredibly high pressure, incredibly just, like, peer pressure event because of the risk mechanics. And increasing your challenge accordingly, and everyone's competing with each other on a personal level. It's tough and it's stressful, and usually the music straddles towards alternative rock, and I think CC1 was actually like flat out nu metal. So when this one happened and the menu theme was like this super chill, almost chant that reminds me in no small way of Battlestar Galactica's opening music, I was kind of incredibly shocked and felt the need to share it.
Yeah, like the way you're talking about what happens around this music, it sounds like you have runs during the levels where it's I must bring the maximum risk, get this tension up to the maximum, panic, panic, panic. Why does my defense have so many holes? And then it comes to the music and you being offered a free yoga lesson.
Yeah. It says a lot. Okay, so there's this series of animations in the Arknights community. Whenever a CC comes up, someone does an animation involving the main players playing the stage theme or menu music and the doctor being unable to sleep. Item 1, due to reasons that we won't talk about this time, there is no stage music. It's just reusing stage music from an event. So instead, this animator decides to throw in a long fall from FF14 as the music. With the 4 characters you primarily use in this as the players. But then this song starts playing after that, and the doctor's actually asleep, and it kind of ends the joke, which makes me a little sad because I kind of love these little animations. They're adorable.
Well, that makes Contingency Contract 4 a mystery then.
It does. It does, because you had, like, CC0, I forget what CC0 song was. CC1 was the new metal one, and that was designed to, like, pump you up and get you ready to go into the stage and do a thing. And then CC2's was kind of like this, like, determination alternative rock that was actually, like, shockingly good, and I've been getting back into that one lately, mostly because that video came back around. And then there's this third one, which is like, all right, we're just going chill now.
Now, one thing I really like listening to it is that there is these long notes and these almost aquatic sounding atmosphere at the start that in the maybe third or middle of the track starts moving more towards something more sci-fi with the background and which builds up to as much of a climax and slowdown as a chill track like this one can get away with.
Yeah. I'm going to be honest, I actually selected this track before I heard the whole thing. I didn't realize this was a 4-minute track because, like, you're only going to be on that menu for about 30 seconds at a time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, and that's if you take your time and go to the shop and buy stuff and go to the medals and double check what medals you still need to get, so on and so forth. So I haven't actually heard that much of the song, so hearing the synth pad and the song even ramp up a little bit was actually a surprise to me when I listened to it all the way through.
I think that mixture of the very soft vocals with the sci-fi-esque synths that get sort of darker sounding is what reminded me a little bit of Jesper Kid's work, because he was known for having done that on Assassin's Creed 2 and the Hitman franchise a little bit, mostly the Assassin's Creed.
You know what? I hadn't actually thought of that, but you're right. That's actually... This is definitely a Jesper Kid inspired. Actually, I need to talk about it. So, yeah, this was definitely inspired by someone else. But unfortunately, there was a bit of a problem with that. You see, the reason there's no stage music is that Hypergriff had to pull it after it discovered the composer plagiarized it.
Oh boy.
So this song, taking inspiration from someone else, assuming it's the same composer, which it may or may not be, is not really surprising. And this is just a matter of Hypergriff just not vetting their composers well enough, because this particular composer was actually very negative about Arknights even before they got hired, and actually apparently plagiarized the song on purpose just to troll Hypergriff.
That much, huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
Big oof.
Yeah, so the fact that this is inspired by someone else is actually kind of... unsurprising.
Then again, I mean, we each have our own... this reminds me of that. I believe the Automata was mentioned before. There's Jesper Kid. There's this. I'm even getting some small ambient vibes of something like maybe with different timbre of voice, but kind of Ghost in the Shell-ish as well.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I can see that.
Yeah.
And like the fact that there is inspirations and things this reminds us of isn't at all a red flag in itself. That other track is.
Yeah.
Being inspired and
there's nothing
copying are
new under
different
the
things.
sun. Like, everything is inspired by something. Being inspired by is not a problem. I'm never going to claim, well, yeah, that's the same thing. No, that doesn't matter. It depends on how well you do something and how interesting the new creation you make is.
Exactly.
There is a line of just flat out ripping off another song, and that's what the stage music did, which is why it doesn't exist and why we're just getting music from Dark Knight's Memoir event, which the enemies are based on.
I mean, if we thought original creations only, we wouldn't even talk about arranged tracks like we did several times before already.
Yeah. And we're probably going to talk
even
about
the
full-ranged
concerts
albums at
last
some
week.
point.
Exactly. But yeah, no, that track really has an interesting feel that, especially in contrast with what may come around, and I think that's interesting in itself, that it really seems to lean on providing relief in a way.
Yeah, and I think that's helpful, honestly, especially since this is easily the hardest contingency contract yet. Like,
It's
having
a very
that chill
comforting-
response to the absolute craziness that is the actual stage is very welcome.
Yeah, it's a very comforting sort of ambiance that it provides.
And it's very elaborate too, honestly. One of the things I was kind of worried about coming into this topic is having some tracks that was like someone would say, this is so relaxing, and I'm listening to the track and it's like 3 notes. But none of the track really fit that worry, like the way, say, the Spiral Abyss theme from Genshin Impact would, for instance, is a pretty relaxing track, which is slow, but is also utterly uninteresting for a place where you spend so much time and such a tense action into. Like, there's a place for calm, and there's a way to make it work that's more than just a slow tone and a low volume.
Yeah. A song to me still has to be interesting, and I don't really get into, like, I don't like ambient music, so to speak, largely for that reason. I need a hook. I need a melody. And you can absolutely have engaging, interesting, but chill music. Like, one does not preclude the other.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more.
Meanwhile, I'm the guy with the playlist on Spotify called Sleeping Pills that is mostly just that, ambient music. You would hate it. Anyway, moving on.
Moving on.
Moving on to the next track.
Sounds good.
Right. Well, let's move on to something that's still very much active this day, to something that more ancient but also pretty legendary, which is Chrono Trigger. Took us long enough to talk about one of these tracks.
Yeah, no kidding.
A game that's somehow sci-fi and yet less sci-fi than the other track we've mentioned, despite the entire plot being about time travel.
Yeah, but that makes entire sense because it's in 600 AD.
Well, 600
That's
AD of that world. Like, let's be
Yes.
clear here. This isn't exactly Earth we're dealing with, and 1000 AD, their technology is like 1950s real world, so...
Yes,
And
but
yet the
there's
most
also
powerful
like,
weapon is the katana.
I mean, of course.
Yeah, Japanese hero. Is that even remotely surprising? Japanese hero
No, but it's the
in an Akira
No, but the
Toriyama
good
game.
joke.
Like, of course they're going to be generic. That's what they do.
it's not surprising, but it makes for a good joke.
Fair.
Anyway, the first time you hear this track, I think what's the most striking is to note the subtle differences between where, or more accurately, when you landed and when you're coming from. The character, through a bit of an accident, ends up traveling 400 years in the past, but in the same area. So you go to the world map. It's very similar in its structure. The towns are in the same place. The forests are in the same place. But there's much more mist. And this track, which is pretty different from the other track, and is very contemplative. It's very calm as well.
Yeah.
I think a big part of it for me is that the present time in the game, 1,000 years AD,
Yes.
is very bright, very colorful, and when you go back to 600 AD, everything is sort of darker.
Muted is the word you're looking for, and that's an excellent observation.
Yeah, both darker and muted, I would say, and this track sort of adds to that whole melancholy you feel as you see the map.
Yes, because at this point you don't know how to get back yet, so maybe you're stuck in a different world for the rest of your life.
Not just a different world, but one that has none of the tech that your character is used to.
Right.
Yes, exactly. And you're kind of lost at this point. The mist plays into it, but it could be blurry, but in an odd way, the track is particularly clear at times. Like, if you want to add something that's misty in consistence musically, you go for things like long violins or strings, rubbed strings in particular. And they use that a lot for sure, but the hook, the first thing you hear when you actually reach the map, is some pizzicato.
Yep.
Which is the opposite of that. And that's interesting.
Yeah, it's a very textured song. It's considered a long-term favorite. It's considered a long-term favorite for a reason, right? Like, it's kind of one of these classic tracks that I think most gamers, especially most RPG gamers, are at least going to know, like, in the back of their mind. They've heard it somewhere, I'm sure.
Exactly.
And I think it says a lot that just how well this is composed, even on the Super Nintendo hardware. Like, this sounds really good for Super Nintendo hardware.
Yeah, at first when it came to the music selection, I wanted to pick one that I listen every now and then, which is a live arrangement performance with, I think it's 2 strings and a synth. But then I just asked myself, how does the original sound? And it serves my purpose, and every argument I'd ever have for this track works better here.
Yeah. Again, it's just amazing what they were able to come up with on this hardware, and just how talented Yasunori Mitsuda is and continues to be.
I think the entire soundtrack was really, really good at sort of capturing the sounds of acoustic instruments using the SNES limitations. I remember the organs from the church.
Yep.
Also being very lifelike for the chipset.
Well, organ pads are relatively simple. Like, as synth instruments go, organ pads are kind of a predictable frequency range. Like, horns are where things get bad. Like, you almost never hear a good, like, horn sample. It's just so hard to get right.
I think Super NES horn are pretty much, in my mind, a different instrument on their own. Like, when you think of things like even the Final Fantasy Victory fanfare, it's very much Nintendo horn and not horn.
Correct.
I think one of the factors that helps the musical fidelity and the technical prowess of squeezing this kind of music into a Super Nintendo cartridge is that it's ultimately a pretty late game in the Nintendo life cycle. It's from 1995. I mean, it was released here in 1995 at least.
Yeah, and it's like right before the N64 hit and audio fidelity went way up.
Exactly. So at this point, you've got experience with the hardware. You know how to squeeze what you want out of it. And reach the kind of capacity that was promised at the early days of the Super Nintendo, where they did things like release ActRaiser and release a symphonic album that says, here is what you're going to listen, kinda, sorta, don't worry about it.
Yeah, they definitely have come far. But I mean, that's true in just about every scenario up until recorded music became the norm, and then it stopped being about the technology largely because the technology had kind of peaked.
Yeah.
Because now you can just do in a sequencer 128 synth tracks and make them sound exactly perfect, and then just record it down to an Ogg Vorbis and send it to the audio engineer, and you're done.
Yeah, it's like printers for most intents and purposes. It's a solved technology.
Yeah. But back in the day before that happened, man, the things that you could get away with, the things that you could make work in this time frame. And again, just how wonderful the Chrono Trigger soundtrack sounds, despite being like 6 or 7, I think it was actually 8 channels of MIDI. Like, this is all programmed music. And they made it work so well.
Yeah.
I think it was 8 channels, but a couple of them were for sound effects or something.
That's the Nintendo era. That was 4 channels, and one of them doubled as a sound effects channel. I think the Super Nintendo had like... I think the protocol, the broadcast standards literally had a specific number of music channels and then dedicated sound effects channels to prevent having to duck parts of the music out for sound effects like was in the NES.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and do things like have Mega Man shoot in a way that pauses the music when this happens.
Yeah, I mean, like, just listen to Mario 1 and what happens when Mario jumps. You can hear part of the music go away whenever that happens.
Even Metroid, where the soundtrack was very diegetic, if you shoot, part of it goes away.
Yeah, and that's just because of the hardware limitations, and obviously the Super Nintendo had a lot more, like, room to do things, but I believe they actually, like, in Nintendo's, like, broadcast standards, they're like, these audio channels are used just for sound effects, these audio channels are used just for music, have fun.
Yasunori Mitsuda had fun.
He did.
That man is a wizard.
He is. And then you get to the next phase of that career, and you go to his next major soundtrack, the sequel to Chrono Trigger, which would be Chrono Cross, and now all of a sudden you have a ridiculous amount of channels because now we're at 32-bit processing, and recorded audio has started to become a thing because this is post One Winged Angel.
I'm sorry, I think by sequel to Chrono Trigger you mean Radical Dreamers.
It's a sequel, it's not the direct sequel. Chill. I'm not doing this pedantic nonsense with you right now. I'm not having this conversation. Moving on to talk about music and not what you think the preferred sequel is. Schmuck.
Look, I didn't bait you with what we talked about before. I had to bait you with something equally egregious.
I'm just here for the ride, folks.
Rage. Rage and anger, I say. Where was I? Right, you know what? We need some chill music, so let's talk about chill music so we can chill out and I can stop being angry at you for being a pedant.
An insincere pedant at that.
Yeah. You were doing the whole, like, let's troll for the lulz thing. I'm glad this game has a good soundtrack.
Yeah.
I'm a sucker for a good guitar line. And this one just starts with a really great, very chill, just plucked guitar line.
It's so soft.
It is. It's nice.
Which generally isn't the kind of adjective you associate with a guitar, but...
No, but it kind of just shows how versatile that instrument can be. I mean, everyone just, at this point, associates guitar largely with rock music, which is obvious because it's one of the primary instruments, but, like, it can do so much.
In a way, the piano is more percussive than the guitar in this one.
Which is good. I mean, piano's actually a percussion instrument, not that anyone actually thinks of that.
Yes, of course. True.
But this one just has a flow to it that I've always appreciated, and it's just one of those songs that I can just lean back and chill out about.
Yeah. It just makes you want to take a long chair and look at the sea in the sunset.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. And I think that's the best kind of chill music. Like, as I said, it's not like this is devoid of a melody. It's not like this is devoid of texture. But it's definitely...
Very much the opposite.
Yeah. No, it's got a great hook. It's got a great melody line. It's just a really just nice song that really fits the bill. But it's also, like, super hubbable and super memorable. And again, Yasunori Mitsuda's awesome. He continues to be awesome. I still need to play Xenoblade 2. Why haven't I done this yet?
Yeah, why haven't you done this yet?
Time is the real answer.
It's an excellent game. I mean, it's a very stupid game as well.
Oh, I'm sure.
Let's not get into that.
Yeah, that's not really the relevant factor here. But it is, like, Yasunori Mitsuda's newest soundtrack, even if it's a collaboration with Ace Plus and... There's someone else on that list. There was a third composer. That doesn't really matter. I mean, we're just kind of showing just how good Mitsuda continues to be, and while he's not in that Yoshitaka Hirota camp of I really wish he would do more, I really do kind of wish he would do more. Like, I've never heard a bad soundtrack out of this guy. I've heard bad individual songs, but never a bad soundtrack.
Yes.
And this song is, you know, it's still very different from what we heard in Chrono Trigger, that's for sure.
Yes.
But it still just shows just how masterful he is.
I think Chrono Cross sounded actually more folky, I would say, than Chrono Trigger, which was a bit more, not necessarily orchestral, but a bit more grandiose, I'd say.
Yeah.
The compositions. Chrono Cross, even when it uses an electric guitar, sounds pretty folky, pretty, not always chill, but more earthy, I guess, is a way of putting it.
Yeah. Like, I mentioned a little bit... Wait, no, I can't say that because that part would be cut. I was thinking recently about Stardew Valley as well for one of the track candidates, and this music would feel in that kind of game, honestly.
I can see it.
Whereas even Wincing wouldn't, I'd argue.
Yeah, I think that one's also too melancholic for such a game. This one is just relaxing, just chill.
Yeah.
Kind of has a bit of a warm sound to it, even.
Head empty, just Mitsuda.
Pretty much. I don't really have anything I don't really have anything to add to that. It just sort of clicks as a song in all the right ways.
Yeah, I mean, the most of the Chrono Cross OST kind of has this quality where even if I haven't listened to tracks from it in years, I listen to the first hook and it all comes back to me.
Yeah.
And I have played Chrono Cross like once and I basically rushed it without caring about getting any of the 5 million characters in there or anything.
How dare you.
I don't really remember most of what happens in there, but the soundtrack... I'd kind of say at this point that the soundtrack to me is bigger than the game it's attached to.
I would more or less agree with that. I'm a lot more forgiving of Chrono Cross than some people, though I will admit it's a fairly flawed game, but I thought it was a fine one.
Yes.
I guess my primary issue with it, if anything, is that, as you said, the soundtrack does eclipse it in no small way, because it is a legendary soundtrack for a reason, and I wish people would put it on the same pedestal as Chrono Trigger, because it is worth it.
Yeah, I'd say for Chrono Trigger, the thing is that the soundtrack is legendary, but so is the game, and they kind of stand toe to toe.
Yeah.
I think in Chrono Trigger, the soundtrack complements the game. In Chrono Cross, it eclipses the game.
I wouldn't be that harsh.
I wouldn't be
that harsh. The tracks fit way too well the scenes and the hand-painted decors to really eclipse it.
Yeah. I got a lot of love for this track, and I mentioned that I wish Yasunori and Mitsuda would make more, and there's been, not so much rumors, but there's been this, someone at some point at Square was trying to make Chrono break, and that always fell through. Despite, more Chrono probably being just a money printer.
Yes.
And I wonder if Yasunori Mitsuda's presence, or lack thereof, had something to do with why that never came to pass, because at some point, Square released a really bad, retread, I guess, of at least the combat system called I Am Setsuna, which, let me put it this way, if we ever did an episode on bad soundtracks, I would be smacking this one down get a load of this garbage. And I'm just it's become just so endemic, so emblematic, excuse me. It's just become so emblematic of the Chrono series is this Mitsuda soundtrack, because even, Radical Dreamers, you mentioned that one earlier, that was a no-name visual novel that 4 people have played outside of Japan, and even that had a Mitsuda soundtrack and was unnecessarily good, from what little I've heard of it.
Yeah, I don't know if he did anything for Square Enix beyond the first Xeno Saga.
I don't...
Oh, no, that... And was that even Square? No, it was
Xenosaga was not
Namco and
Square.
Monolith. Yes, so even before that.
Yeah, possibly Xenogears. Or was Xenogears before Chrono Cross? It was one of those two was the last thing they did for Square, and I think...
Xenogears was before Chrono Cross.
Okay, so then Chrono Cross was probably his last soundtrack with Square.
Yeah, and then he moved on to a certain game named Shadow Hearts, along with Iwadare.
Right, and then he did work for... I believe he did do some for Xenosaga, though he didn't do the whole soundtrack.
Yeah, he did a bit of level 5 here and there.
Yep.
He did some Monolith. I'd say these are his two main
He's done...
go-to places.
He's back in the Xeno series with Xenoblade. Xenoblade 2 specifically.
Yeah.
I think he did, one song for Xenoblade 1, and I think it was, the credits theme. Which I kind of don't count, because, that was more of a licensed track for hire than it was, part of a game soundtrack.
Appearance. Also, he was one of the contributors of Kid Icarus Uprising, which is one of my favorite soundtracks of all time, for one of my most underrated game ever, so...
They really need to re-release that one. I really want to play that one.
Preferably with a control scheme for human hands, please.
That would probably be nice, I think. I don't know, I haven't played it, but I'm going to take your word for it. Yeah, no, he's just...
They had to release a stand, because you couldn't at the same time move the character, handle the camera, and keep the 3DS, upright.
What?
How fun.
Yeah.
Okay. I was not made aware of... Okay.
I like when Nintendo gets creative with their controls, but there's a limit.
There's a limit, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, let's not forget, these are also the minds behind the Virtual Boy, so for everything they do right, they do something equally wrong.
And the N64 controller.
What a mess of a controller that was. We don't have 3 hands, guys. Chill.
Anyway, more Yasunori Mitsuda would be good.
Yes. Preferably on a real Chrono game and not a weird knockoff like I Am Setsuna.
Yeah.
Alright, let's move on.
Let's move on back to sci-fi, I guess. This time with Surviving Mars.
Pretty realistic sci-fi, close to us, I'd say.
Yeah,
Hard sci-fi
I'd say it's fairly down to earth, even though it's not on Earth.
Hey.
Ha.
Yay. I did a funny, except it wasn't funny.
It was kind of funny.
I could open my window and let you hear the crickets.
Yeah, no thanks.
Surviving Mars.
This game, it's supposedly one of those survival builders, because you have to deal with resources and keeping people alive on Mars and whatnot. You're building the first colony, but it's just so chill. The soundtrack is even more chill, and we brought a track called H3PO4. The entire soundtrack is basically chemical compounds as written chemically, like H2O and CO2, and yes, those two also are tracks in the soundtrack. The entire thing I find lovely. It's sort of a mixture of synthwave-like sounds with acoustic instruments, mostly the piano, sometimes other instruments as well. I believe there's a track with a clarinet. There's some violins on occasion. It's just very pretty to me, and it really grabs that vibe of you are in space, you are away from Earth, but you are chilling, not facing constant danger, even though it does have an expansion that does that a bit of danger, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, no, to first answer a question I'm sure many people will have after you mentioned the name of the tracks, H3PO4 is the chemical formula for sulfuric acid. Wait, no, phosphoric acid.
Phosphoric acid, yes.
Phosphoric acid.
Wow, chemistry jokes, I like it.
Yeah. And as far as this track goes, yeah, there is, as the main actor, the piano, but there's also this pretty light synth bass line, sort of, which has this very ascension sort of movement that it kind of reminds me of another city builder, which is Anno 2070.
Right.
In part because I believe they both, in these kind of tracks, try to give out a feeling of utopia in being built, which is a kind of one of the aim in this game.
Yeah, I'd say that's fair. I haven't played that particular game in the Anno franchise, despite being a fan of that franchise. But I think that's a fair assessment on the vibe that you get from the Surviving Mars soundtrack. It does have some extra radios that they also release as soundtracks later. But as far as the main soundtrack goes, it does really have that vibe that things are calm because you know you are building the next big step in how we live.
Right.
There's also at least two other ways this track fits and works so well. One of them is a meta level, which is that city builders without any immediate danger are chill to play. And I think this helps with that. It kind of accompanies you, especially at this early stage, And that's my second point, which is that in this game, you basically have several phases you have to go through to expand your building of this colony. And the first phase is mostly robot-based preparation, which is even more relaxing than the others, because unlike the settling humans that eventually come, robots don't need to eat and can just recharge, so you can take as much time as you need without needing to pause or consider the balance of moods and hunger and needs and the likes. And you can just build and prepare the colony however you want. And that's a drug that's pretty much perfect to get you in that kind of mood.
And the robots do not procreate, which, yes, is a mechanic, and yes, it can screw up your colony when the humans do it too much.
Very much so.
So I have a take I'm not sure y'all are going to like about this track, and that is this doesn't seem chill to me, like, at all. This actually seems very kind of tense and foreboding. Like, I heard this, and I'm just like, I don't feel like chilling. I feel like something's about to go wrong.
I can kinda get that, but I think
the baseline can be ambivalent for this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think when the strings come in particular, at around, I think, a minute and a half, it breaks that tension really well to me. I think from that point onwards, it really becomes that you're building a utopia thing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I definitely get that. The back half of the song probably feels a lot less like thing, but it's still set up by that first half, which really feels like... I feel like something's about to explode.
Well, that's the population once you human won't stop procreating.
Now Galen won't be able to cut that part.
I could try. I can be creative with my edits. I can figure a way around that.
The fun we have when our sound editor is also a host.
I'm trying to keep this PG-13, guys.
Hey, that was way more PG-13 than what I first wanted to say.
Yeah, no, I was probably thinking it too.
We used the scientific term this time.
You did.
Which is suitable for this game.
Can we please move on now to a different, even part of this topic? Like, I don't mind sticking with this topic, but this is a conversation that needs to not continue.
Yes, this cannot continue.
But yeah, a shout out to the composer. I believe it's George Strezov, it's pronounced.
Okay.
The entire soundtrack is sort of like this. It's it has a bit of a deep bass, bit of a foreboding thing, because you are building the first colony on Mars ever in the game, but it also has that utopic side of things. And
yeah, I suppose there is this small matter of no breathable air outside of your domes.
Pretty much. I was waiting so long for the soundtrack to come on streaming services because it wasn't available for a long time. I think it got released on streaming this year, and the game's, I think, 2 or 3 years old at this point. So I'm very happy with that.
Speaking of games that are 2 or 3 years old...
Your segues are on point today.
Kind of.
Thank you. So there was a time where 2 games came out simultaneously, 2 2D platformer games. One was Iconoclast and one was Celeste. And I thought, you know what, I'd rather give my time to Iconoclast. It seems more appealing to me. It was not the most popular choice because boy is Celeste popular.
Yeah.
Iconoclast, not bad by any means, but definitely a bit more obscure in today's general mindset.
If it makes you feel any better or not, or I don't know, I don't think I remember this game, so...
Yeah. Anyway, Celeste itself, so it's this platformer where you're going through a variety of levels with a little bit of story, nice balance, and once you're done with the main level and have found the appropriate cassette tape, you have the B-side level.
Right.
Which are essentially remixed version of the levels with remixed version of their tracks.
Yep, and there's a C-side later, which is even harder.
Exactly. And this one is just one of my favorites. It takes this kind of occult, tense, very dark track and turns it into this reasonably high-paced. It's probably one of the fastest tracks for this episode. But that also has this very calm air to it. It's not the kind of chill like the Chrono Cross track where you just wanna sit around and watch the waves float by. It's more about the kind of chill that you have in the background when you're doing something else, when you want to only half focus, sort of. Because that track is... first I should say it's the remix of the original track by Lena Rayne, made by Mello. There we go. And it's very... it's got steps. It evolves a lot throughout the course of this music. And,
I think the intro to me, speaking of the various steps it has, the intro kind of sounded to me like it could belong in a neo-noir sort of thing, except it swapped a saxophone for a synthesized horn. Kept that sort of noir piano, just a bit more fast-paced.
Yeah, I could definitely see the synth being used as a saxophone substitute.
Yeah, that was actually the impression I got as well.
That certainly works. And it's got a little bit of beat, but it never really takes you out of it. You're just going along the changes in the music while being along for the ride.
Yep.
Overall, most of the calm tracks have this stillness to it, this relaxing stillness, but stillness nonetheless. That one is more of a kinetic track, but also still with this calm impression, and that's part of why I picked it, because it's different, but still has this ultimately chill vibe.
Yeah, I think when the beat comes up around, I think, a quarter of the track into it, it sort of reminds me more of I don't know what the genre is called, but there's a very chill genre of electronic music that a lot of independent artists go for, which I also listen to a lot at night. It has a beat, but it's not there for you to dance, and it's not fast, so it's like a bike again.
The way you're describing kind of make me feel of lo-fi, except I don't really see it in this case.
Lo-fi
It's
is just
not
such a
lo-fi.
weird statement, because generally speaking, things that are called lo-fi are definitely not. They're very slickly produced. They're just quiet.
Yeah, no, it's not lo-fi hip-hop. It's I think the genre is related to trance, but it's more slow paced.
Yeah.
The genre I'm thinking of. I have a few examples that I listen to, but I don't know the genre's name. I really should look it up. But it's that sort of. It has a beat, but the beat just sort of there just to add more texture than really move things forward necessarily.
Yes. Yeah.
So it fits really well. It's a nice track to listen to at night.
Like for this one, honestly, the drums, I mean, they eventually do take over the beat, but I'd say that for the beginning of the track in particular, it's the piano that sets the pace more than anything else.
Yeah, I could definitely count the beat of the song with the piano.
Yeah. It's more of a harmony
think the
line,
piano-
but yeah.
I think the melody being played on the piano is actually a note per beat. So I could actually count the beat with the piano. When the drum machine, I guess, comes in, I think it's on the 2 and the 4.
Yeah.
But yeah, I could definitely count the beat without the drum machine.
Now then, shall we move on to the beating heat of the desert?
Sure,
better
I
place
like
to
this one a
chill
lot.
out. Yeah, we've mentioned before Assassin's Creed, and we've mentioned before Jesper Kid. And most people, when they think of Assassin's Creed, they think of Jesper Kid. And the next track is Assassin's Creed, but it's not Jesper Kid. So yeah, the next track, it's from Assassin's Creed Origins, which is set in Hellenic Egypt. And the soundtrack does have very Jesper Kid-esque feels to it, I'd say. Jesper Kid-esque vibes. But the composer is actually Sarah Schachner, I believe it's pronounced. And the track is...
I pronounce it Schachner, but she is American, so I don't know personally.
Yeah, I'm just reading it as if it was German, because my surname is German, so I kind of know how those surnames go. Anyway, the track in question is Nomads of the White Desert, and it can be a bit contentious to call this track chill, as with a couple of the others we brought up today, because all Assassin's Creed soundtracks, save for maybe a couple of them, have this dark synth that permeates the tracks, kind of remind you of the Animus thing, I guess. So it's not the sort of stuff that everyone can chill to.
Yeah, and eventually, after the midway point, it definitely has a bit more of that darker vibe.
Yeah, it sort of comes and goes in every track in the game.
Yeah.
But this track in particular, it's one of the many tracks that can play when you are just roaming either the cities or the desert in the game. And the name kind of implies it, Nomads of the White Desert. And Assassin's Creed Origins has lots and lots of amazing looking dunes. The lighting is pretty gorgeous, so it goes well with that.
One thing I add though about the title and how it reflects on the track is that it's not an empty desert. There's people there. It's not just the arid, desolate, death-hit plains of nothingness. There's life there somewhere. A civilization around.
Yeah, I'd say a couple vibes I also get from this track in particular, especially compared to the others, the other tracks that play when you're exploring. This one is one of, I think, 2 or 3 tracks that have quite a bit of reverb, which kind of plays into the heat strokes that you can get in game. You can start seeing things that aren't real, like scarabs falling from the skies and mirages in the distance, and ghostly characters showing up to you but doing nothing. Kind of plays into that. Sort of, you don't know if you can trust your senses thing with the reverb.
I can see that.
Additionally, there's a bit of a movement to this track, I'd say, which kind of makes me think of you actually being on a camel, which you can ride camels in the game. Kind of makes me think of you being on a camel as you explore the desert.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say that. I mentioned before that a fair amount of chill tracks set up a scene in their place, and this one is definitely the one that fits the bill the most. Like, it's about the environment, the desert, and I think that in itself takes you on a bit of a travel course.
Yeah, I think there's a bit into it that has a very ethereal singer.
Yes.
A female voice. That one also plays a lot into the emptiness of the desert, I would say. I can almost hear it as if it was an echo from a distance.
One of the things that I noticed about this, is it actually tends to avoid a lot of the traditional desert instruments.
Yes, I noticed that as well.
Which
the game actually uses some of those more traditional ones. There are tracks with it because
but this song doesn't. That's what I'm talking about right now.
Yeah, this song it's very I'd say it's heavy on the synths, and yet it does get across the feeling of being in a desert somehow.
Yes, but more importantly, and I think that's why I like this as something that's very unique for desert track. It's pre-Arabic desert, which is a different kind of era and a different kind of sound.
Yep. Even I heard
I'm
that
glad
one.
we're in agreement, Bike Man.
Good lord. But yeah, I think it does get across that Hellenic Egypt vibe really well. The entire soundtrack does, to be honest, even if a lot of the tracks do that by association because they sound a lot like movies about Cleopatra that we might have seen in the past. But still, the ambiance is there, and this track in particular is pretty much 100% ambiance.
Yeah, it definitely feels a bit less melodically structured and thus more ambient than some of the other tracks we've talking about, and in particular a lot less so than the track we're going to talk about next, which is the City Ruins from Nier Automata.
Yeah. This was kind of one of the most obvious picks for me. And in fact, it was so obvious that right after...
I picked it too!
Yeah, you cut it. I ended up picking it by complete coincidence. There's this common refrain that picking the obvious choice doesn't make it bad. And it isn't.
Exactly.
It's obvious for a reason.
Yeah, because it's very good.
It is very good. I've made no secret of my love for Keiichi Okabe and Monaka's music when they're allowed to do their thing. This is a case where they're really allowed to do their thing. In this case, I definitely prefer the Janique Nicole version over the Emmy Evans vocals. But man, this song is just smooth. And yes, there's a little bit of tension there. It's a post-apocalyptic environment, but it's a very different one. Than the kind you're used to, I think.
Yes.
And that people are largely self-sufficient. And this was true of the first game as well. It's not really a, scavenger thing. It's not really a constant threat of destruction, at least in regards to that sort of way.
I think one of the things that plays the most into it is the first time you actually hear it. Or some variation of it, anyway, because there's a multiple variation of the song,
Yeah.
throughout the game.
And most of them don't play. That main overworld is actually very quiet for most of the game, which actually was a big complaint I had about it, to be perfectly honest with you.
Exactly. But the first time where it's very kind of fits the most, because at this early point in the game, when you're done doing like 2 shooter sequences in a row, and you've done exploding multiple giant robots in a facility and running around everywhere, you're dropped into this these city ruins. And there are a few machines, but they don't even react to you nor attack.
Yep.
At first.
And it's just this very peaceful, just very haunting song in all the right ways.
Yes.
It reminds me a little bit of like almost British trip hop, like Enya, but not as ethereal. Like, it's still a lot more towards the mainstream side of things, with those elements kind of sprinkled in.
In a way, it's kind of strange that it ends up being so calm given the pace of Nier Automata's action when you do eventually get fighting the robots.
Yeah.
In this area.
Well, I mean, that's Platinum for you. They really like doing the like really frenetic action sequences, and yes, this song is definitely in contrast to that gameplay type. But at the same time, I think that's kind of the point.
Yeah. One of the point, anyway.
Yeah, I think there's an intentional dichotomy there.
And the thing is that I do see another point, but talking about it would be spoilers.
Yeah, we don't want to do that. Not for that game.
Yes.
That's one of those games where the spoilers are kind of sacrosanct. We're not doing that.
Yes.
I was going to say that if I recall correctly, this track actually plays when you first see grass and actual plants in the world.
Yes.
Too,
yep.
Which also adds to the vibe.
Yes, I believe actually that it goes to the point where I'm not 100% sure. I'd need to replay it to make sure. But I believe you land in the area where eventually the music plays, but at first you need to get out of the parking garage to get outside of it, and then the music starts.
Yep.
I believe that's how it goes, yeah.
I think so. I've played the game a little bit. I went slightly past that part. Platinum games aren't quite for me, so I haven't finished this game. But that sounds right to me.
Yeah. Okay, good. I'm not mad. So yeah, it really kind of underlines the fact that even though it's a ruined place, it's not an entirely dead place.
Yep.
Plays into the beauty of nature, even if nature is taking over what was once human land, let's say. It plays into the beauty of seeing nature thrive like that.
Yeah. And much like the first Nier, the local animals will mess you up if you're not careful.
Oh yeah, no, that deer knows how to murder an android 5 ways and back.
Mm-hmm.
I died to that thing a few times.
Everybody did.
It's surprisingly hard to parry. It doesn't have any tell the way robots do.
Yep.
And I'd be very worried if it did.
Yep. Oh.
I do not want robotic deers in my world.
Apropos of nothing, I'm remembering a text Let's Play from the Dark Id of the first Nier, of Nier Gestalt. And the dude is like, oh, I just have to hunt some goats? This seems like an easy side quest. Gets instantly annihilated with the, with this, like, gif of just, like, the scariest looking deer on the, scariest looking goat on the planet. And he's like, what just happened?
Yes. Speaking of, I considered, before coming to picking this track, I considered the Plains track from Nier first, before concluded that it was too alive and too jaunty.
Yeah, that one really has a sense of
but
adventure to it, though. Hills of Radiant Wind is legit one of my favorite songs of all time, and if I haven't talked about it yet, I need to.
It's amazing, it's great, but it's not nearly as chill as this one is.
No, certainly not. That's why I gravitated towards this one immediately. I didn't even consider Hills of Radiant Wind, much as I love that song.
Yeah, no, that one has a sense of adventure, while this one has a sense of...
There's a somberness to it.
Maybe a bit of contemplation.
Contemplation, I like that.
Yeah, sort of a somber wonder, I'd say.
Somber, but not sad.
Yeah.
No, it's just you're looking with wonder at the world for the first time in the game, and it's a bit somber, but things aren't sad or horrible. You're looking at the past, you're looking at ruin, and it adds a somber element to it.
Still, very relaxing, very comfortable song, regardless.
Yes.
Well, that is about all the time we have. I hope you all have had a relaxing time listening to us talk about relaxing music. I still don't have an outro. Eddie, we've got to work on an outro.
Chill out, man.